What's up, guys? Swift here covering everything Chicago Bears. Today I'm trying to identify Ryan Poles' blue chip prospects. Ryan Poles recently said there are 7 to 8 players in a bucket at the top of this draft that he calls blue chip prospects he would be comfortable taking at number 1 overall. This also kind of identifies the range and represents how far down Ryan Poles would likely move. You think you would take the 7 to 8 players and then add the 3 to 4 quarterbacks that could go as well. And I think the furthest down Ryan Poles trades is 11 overall, unless they come up with an even bigger offer. I obviously don't know who the 7 to 8 players are, but I'm going to try my best to give you the top 15 guys I think could be in that bucket and talk about why they fit and why they might not. Let's get right into it. First off is Jalen Carter. Everybody knows about Carter by now. His off-field incident will remain a huge question mark until it is resolved. I believe every GM will feel differently, but plenty could have maturity questions about him now. I still think he's easily one of the top 3 most talented players in this entire draft class, and I see no way he falls outside the top 10. For the Chicago Bears, he fits perfectly in the middle of the defense as a wrecking ball at 3 technique or even at the nose position. The only concerns are that he sometimes takes plays off. How does he fit with the hits philosophy? And now there are the questions about maturity and does he love the game of football? Those will be answered by Ryan Poles and company. Jalen Carter was my favorite prospect a few weeks ago. I think now with the Bears trading down, it's a lot less likely that we end up with Carter on draft day. Next up is Will Anderson. What more can I say about this guy? He's a polished and accomplished prospect that has terrorized the SEC for years now. He's a lock to be one of the first 3 defensive players taken in this draft, and he draws comparisons to Micah Parsons and Von Miller. He has all the tools to be a pass rush specialist in the NFL, but he's also a 3-down player who can be a difference maker against the run as well. He just needs to continue working on his game. If he gets stronger and adds to his repertoire of pass rush moves, he could be unstoppable. If Will Anderson is on the board when Ryan Poles finally makes his pick, look out. And then we get to Tyree Wilson. Just a freak of an athlete from Texas Tech with an incredible wingspan. He fits the size, length, and athleticism that Ryan Poles looks for and would be a perfect fit if he was on the board whenever the Bears do pick. I think he can play outside at edge or move inside and play 3-tech. He plays like a Bear and would fit really well in what Ryan Poles looks for and fits the hits philosophy as well. Tyree Wilson is definitely a favorite to be picked by the Bears on draft day. And then we get to a guy who's just been flying up draft boards, Iowa's Lucas Van Ness. If you still think he's a second rounder, you are behind in the times. He has had first round buzz for a while now, and his performance paired with his interviews at the Combine only solidified that with NFL front offices. He could go anywhere after the first 7 or 8 picks in the NFL draft. Van Ness played hockey in high school, and he wasn't a starter for the Hawkeyes, but he had 46 pressures and 9 sacks this year, while also playing very well versus the run. He has a bit of Bosa to his game, and he's another guy whose best football is still ahead of him. Van Ness has been flying up draft boards, and he's a guy I can't overlook and definitely think there's a chance that Ryan Poles could end up calling his name on draft day. And then we get to another guy that's just flying up draft boards, but also fits the same profile as a guy I just can't write off because he fits with the Bears. His name is Kalija Copeland, defensive tackle from Pittsburgh. Jalen Carter's stock falling only helps Cansey's as he now vies to be the top defensive tackle taken. The Aaron Donald comps are not crazy. His size, speed, strength, agility, and even college he went to are all dead on with Donald. He also has a relationship with AD off the field, and while he's not the next Aaron Donald because nobody is, he does have the elite burst and pass rush skills to succeed in the NFL at his size. Kancey continues climbing up draft boards and is an outside option for the Bears, but I think he'd be a killer fit at 3-tech. He's a bit undersized, but I think he can do everything Eberflus wants out of the position. Do not rule this guy out. And then we get to Myles Murphy. His stock has fallen a little bit. He didn't wow anyone at the combine, but he's still a lock to go in the first round and should be a day one starter in the NFL. He's a freakish athlete who needs some work on his pass rushing technique, but he has the tools to be a high-end starter in the NFL for a long, long time. I love Murphy's game, and he fits perfectly as a defensive end in Eberflus's system. Murphy isn't a sexy name, but he's a guy who gets the job done and has upside to go with it. And then we get to the guy that all Bears fans have on their mind, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's one of my favorite targets in the entire draft. Some people want to label him as a slot receiver, including myself. He is most productive out of the slot, but putting labels on players is weird. Cooper Kupp gets most of his production out of the slot too. I think JSN compares very favorably to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he has built-in chemistry with Justin Fields. Unlike TTNL and some others, I do think he's worth a first-round pick and would love to see him in Chicago. I've watched his tape, and I think he fits perfectly with this offense, and he would instantly upgrade our passing attack. It's just a bonus that he's friends with Justin Fields, and the pick would definitely please our QB1. That's just a bonus, though. That's not the only reason you take him. You take him because of his skill set. People sometimes take the slot comments wrong, but Amon-Ra St. Brown went to the Pro Bowl as a slot receiver this past season, and Cooper Kupp had a record-breaking season the previous year. Being labeled as a slot guy isn't always a bad thing, especially if you can be an elite one, and I think JSN has that potential. And then we're going to talk about another one of Justin Fields' former teammates that I wouldn't mind having on this team, Ohio State offensive tackle Paris Johnson Jr. He has the size, power, arm length, and athleticism that Ryan Poles loves, and he remains close friends with Fields, and he just happens to be one of the top 2 tackles in the entire draft. Johnson's a guy who checks every box of what Ryan Poles wants in an offensive tackle, and also has that added bonus of a relationship with our quarterback. I know JSN gets all the hype for being his former teammate, but I would love it if Poles was able to add JSN or Paris Johnson Jr. He just looks like a stud tackle prospect to me who could come in and start day one. Speaking of stud tackle prospects, though, we also have Georgia's Broderick Jones. He's a legit first-round prospect who also had an awesome combine performance. He would be a day one starter for a lot of teams, but he is a bit of a raw prospect. He shows all the tools, power, athleticism, and nasty play that you want from an O-lineman. He will get drafted higher than his tape suggests, but he's another guy whose best football is still ahead of him. I love this dude as a prospect, but I prefer Paris Johnson Jr. as my top tackle. And I still kind of believe the best option for the Bears in this route would be to grab a right tackle in free agency and draft defensive line or JSN here. But next up is another guy, local kid, Peter Skarronski. He's a solid draft prospect that has the potential to legit start anywhere on an offensive line. He could probably play any of the 5 spots. If his arms were just 2 inches longer, I'd say he's a perfect fit for the Chicago Bears. However, I'm just concerned whether or not Ryan Poles would view him as a guard. His hand usage and tape suggests he at least deserves a shot to play tackle in the NFL. He's a hometown kid with tons of potential. He's a safe pick in the first round who should at least be a top-tier guard in the NFL. But just right there, that says it all. In my opinion, Ryan Poles probably views this guy as a guard, so it makes me question whether or not he'd take him in the top 10. And then I have 3 cornerback prospects for you. First up is Illini's Devin Witherspoon. He's just a feisty baller at cornerback, and I just love his game. I won't go into too much detail with any of the corners, but there are 3 corners that should be locks to go in the top 15 that Ryan Poles will definitely have his eye on, and Devin Witherspoon is my CB1. His play style reminds me a lot of Jair Alexander, and even though I don't rank corner as a huge need, he's a legit playmaker that would improve our entire defense and make our secondary elite. And then we have Joey Porter Jr. as well, son of former Steelers legend Joey Porter, who I did see at the Combine. He's another just stud cornerback prospect who has all the tools that you're looking for. Same with the next guy on the list, Christian Gonzalez. Both of these guys can do it all and had awesome combines. They both look like top 15 picks as well. I personally would prefer spending the pick on defensive line, O-line, or a receiver. But I can't rule out these 3 corners yet. Poles said again this offseason that he really values the corner position. If he did take a corner with his first pick this year, I think that would have to mean bye-bye for Jalen Johnson. After taking a corner with his first pick in his first 2 drafts, I honestly wouldn't like that. I prefer signing JJ to an extension and spending this pick in the trenches, but I can't rule these guys out yet. Let's get to my final 2 guys on the list. First up is Nolan Smith, who just set the Combine on fire. If it wasn't for Anthony Richardson, Nolan Smith might have been the talk of the week. Playing in Georgia's insane defense, he never put up the stats he was projected to, and he missed some time due to injuries as well. However, he is a freak athlete who was a 5-star recruit out of high school that just ran a 4.39 at the Combine as a defensive end. Nolan Smith is almost a lock to go in the first round, and if we trade back, especially outside of the top 10, look out for Nolan Smith. I know some people don't like him, but he's a hot name and a guy just oozing with potential. And then the last guy on my list is Will McDonald, who had an incredible Senior Bowl week and topped it off with a nice performance at the Combine. He's risen into a first-round draft prospect. His tape warrants it, and even though he's definitely a sleeper on the list, I just can't rule him out after Getsy and Poles got to see him firsthand down in Mobile. His pass rushing upside is not far behind Will Anderson's. He has a similar frame and athletic skill set. He just doesn't possess the power and ability to set the edge like Anderson does. Can McDonald bulk up and improve? I believe he can, but I don't know if it's enough for Poles to risk this early of a pick on him. I just can't rule it out yet. I love Will McDonald's game. Those are my top 15. The last 2 are sleeper guys. Both Nolan Smith and Will McDonald's are a little bit underrated, but could be guys that Poles falls in love with. I'm very high on both of those guys. Most people didn't have Nolan Smith as a first-round guy, but he was the best pass rusher on Georgia's team last year, better than Tavon Walker, who went number 1 overall. He also dominated the Combine. He's a baller and just a guy I think will fit the bill if Poles trades outside of the top 10. And Will McDonald is just another tremendous athlete that was virtually unblockable at the Senior Bowl, and he's one of the biggest risers in the draft. I've already done a scouting report on Tyree Wilson, but I will be doing breakdowns on almost all of these 15 guys as well. I will probably skip the cornerbacks unless we draft one, but I will be doing full breakdowns on every single draft pick we make this year, just like I did last year. But I want to cover a lot of these potential blue chippers before the draft. So watch out for those. I'll have those coming up after free agency. I might finish 1 or 2 during free agency, depending on how busy Ryan Poles is. But those are my 15 guys. I think some of them can be ruled out, but I wanted to cast as wide of a net as possible at first and then narrow it down over the next 6 weeks to try to figure out who Ryan Poles is targeting. It's all in fun. I will break down whoever he drafts in April, but I think we have a decent idea of what Poles is looking for. It's still only his second draft though, so expect some surprises. We do, however, know that Ryan Poles has a group or a bucket of blue chip players at the top of this draft. I'm going to try my best to identify those players so we can narrow down who the Bears will pick this year. If I had to guess right now, assuming we trade down to picks 7 through 11, I'd say my top 3 options would be defensive line, offensive tackle, and wide receiver. If we picked at 9, my favorite guy for each position, the defensive line would have to be between Tyree Wilson and Lucas Van Ness. The offensive tackle would be Paris Johnson Jr., and the wide receiver would be JSN. Out of my top 15 prospects, 8 of them were on the defensive line, 6 defensive ends, and 2 defensive tackles. We had 3 offensive tackles, 3 cornerbacks, and then we had 1 receiver. I probably should have included a second receiver, Jordan Addison, in this list, but I have him slightly below JSN, and I wanted to keep this list even at 15. Yeah, I know 15 is an odd number, but it's a good number for rankings. I will cover each guy in full detail soon, though. Let me know who your guys are and who you think Ryan Poles should target. Leave it in the comments. He has flexibility to not only do what he wants with the first pick, but to build this roster the way he wants. It's a dream that most GMs never get to experience, and he has his buddy Ian Cunningham along for the ride, and it only makes it more special. Buckle up, guys. It's about to get really interesting. Stay tuned. I have so much more coming over the next week or two. We're full steam away into the NFL offseason. It's time to get hyped. Don't forget to hit that like button for me. And until next time, bear down.
Thanks for watching Swift Sports Network. Like and subscribe for daily Chicago Bears updates, knowledge over narratives.